Good afternoon and welcome to Morning Matters with ADHD, sponsored by Iron Shore Pharmaceuticals. Dr. Novotni will discuss the challenges of ADHD mornings and provide useful tips and techniques to help manage mornings. You will learn why mornings are not adequately discussed and how the right kind of dialogue with your doctor may help you better manage ADHD. Dr. Novotny is an internationally recognized expert and thought leader in the field of ADHD. She is the former president and CEO of the National Attention Deficit Disorder Association, otherwise known as ADDA, an inspiring speaker, best-selling author, psychologist, coach, and parent of a young adult with ADHD. She is the author of Adult ADHD, What Does Everybody Else Know That I Don't? And the Novotni Social Skills Checklist. We are going to have a brief presentation, and then following that presentation, we're going to have an opportunity for you guys to ask your questions. You can just type your questions into the question box, and I will read them out loud, and Dr. Novotny will answer those questions. So thank you very much. I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Novotny. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and glad you're able to attend the webinar wherever and whenever you are. Want to talk about mornings. A lot of people have struggles in the morning, and even though I was a psychologist specializing in behavior management, I too actually really had a tough time in the morning in particular. This is my son Jared when he was little. And our mornings usually involved chasing him, catching him, trying to dress him, get his teeth brushed. And he would always tend to get into different things. Here we were just trying to do a little cooking thing one day, but Jared always added an extra dimension to mornings. Actually, the first year he went to school instead of the Montessori school, he was tardy 22 times the first quarter. And again, I have a PhD in psychology, specialist in behavior management, and I just had an incredibly difficult time trying to get him out the door on time. You know, if I looked away for a second, there was a mess. One day, my husband and I both slept in a little bit, and we heard Jared downstairs, but we thought he was quiet, so we thought we were safe. And when I went downstairs, he had dumped the milk and the pudding all over our floor, and he was ice skating. So I just, went back upstairs and talked to my husband. It's like, okay, Bob, which is bus is going to miss work today for a while? And I thought one day to be a good story. But again, at the time, it's really, really frustrating, to just set your morning off that way. Luckily, Jared is now gainfully employed and he has his own house and he's married, and so we got through it. So the idea is to give you guys some information that maybe will help you manage mornings as well. We did talk to our doctor about Jared in the mornings, which isn't unusual because a lot of people talk, but the doctor's main concern was actually just school for us, and that was really common for a lot of the individuals I did counseling or coaching with. If the school grades are going well and the behavior at school is good, a lot of professionals really feel like they've done their job, and the parents can sort of muddle through the morning and muddle through the bedtime. And they just wanted to really focus on the mornings. I mean, the school time rather than the morning. So that was frustrating. But again, being a psychologist and knowing that things should be going better, I just hated all that morning stress that we had. And when I work with a lot of the clients over all the years, the mornings just were so frustrating for so many people because the parents had to get out the door, multiple kids had to get out the door, there were time frames involved, and it's a lot of stress and a lot of pressure. So for me, I thought there just had to be a better way to get the mornings going. And I will confess, I even resorted some mornings to having him go to bed in his clothes so we didn't have to do the clothes thing, even his shoes. I was pretty desperate to try to find something that could work for him. And so I just want you to know that if you struggle with mornings, you're not alone. People don't tend to talk about their struggles in the morning a lot. But again, it actually is quite common, whether it's you or whether it's your children, trying to get out the door can be quite a challenge for a lot of people. There was actually a study done back in 2015, and they found that uh, only 24% of the people didn't feel like morning was that big of a problem. So that left 47% of the people who felt that it was a moderate impairment, and 29% of the people felt that this was actually a severe problem. So again, I don't know where you would fall on the continuum. I'm assuming you'd have to be at least moderate or severe. You probably wouldn't be dialed in today. Uh, some of the issues that tended to pop up in the early morning, again, based on the 2015, the first one was just people being very easily distracted. You know, starting off to go get a backpack or starting off to get breakfast and ending up watering a plant, walking a dog, coloring, cooking something, doing dishes. So again, it's very, very common that you start off on one path and end up very easily distracted. Not listening, also equally impressive. 73% of the people felt that not listening was definitely getting in the way of a smooth morning. Inattentiveness during task, the never failing impulsivity, failure to complete tasks, and awareness of time. Again, these were some of the high points that they found that really get in the way of people effectively being able to manage the mornings and get out the door. This one I found particularly telling. This was how the caregivers tended to react to ADHD symptoms during the early morning. And the first one was that a lot of the caregivers felt that they were raising their voice, much more than they wanted. That was 81% of the people in this study really were concerned that they were yelling or at least talking sternly much more than they wanted. And I've had a number of my clients tell me, I don't like who I am in the morning. I love my child. I don't want to be yelling and screaming, but I'm just so frustrated. Um, a lot of the caregivers also reported being overwhelmed and exhausted. That was up at 79%. And again, I didn't do the yelling, but I definitely was in the overwhelmed, exhausted, feeling constantly stressed, and even feeling inadequate as a parent. And again, I wasn't just a regular parent. My husband was a teacher. I'm a behavior management specialist. And it's like, what am I missing? How do I do this? And a lot of parents find themselves or caregivers punishing more, praising less, not really enjoying their child. And this isn't something a lot of people talk about, but behind closed doors and counseling sessions, I've heard that a number of times that they're just so frustrated that they really don't enjoy their child. And especially if you have one with ADHD, that one tends to take up most of the time, and then you don't have a lot of time and energy for the other kids. So again, it's a whole family system issue, trying to manage the morning routine. So in spite of mornings really presenting a major challenge, it's relatively rare for patients to bring up the morning or try to talk about the morning when they do have time with their professionals. Uh, So we definitely need to do a better time of making the morning a better anchor, waking up and just having everybody be able to go out the door, not being yelled at. Um, I can't tell you how many little guys I've seen just so demoralized because they just get yelled at all the time and they just can't seem to get it right. And I've had adults stressed out trying to get out the door in the morning. Coaching, I've even called people individually like a couple times every 10 minutes to get them out the door after we did plans. I've had clients be fired for being late or being unprepared or missing something again. And again, it doesn't take much to throw something off. I know one of the stories in one of my books was about Jared calling me from school, and I had always made it a policy I wasn't going to bail him out. We were going to manage with him just doing whatever it was he was supposed to be doing. But I got this panic call in the morning, so I'm like, okay, Jared, what is it? He's like, Mom, I need something, and you can't give me that lecture about responsibility. You must do this. And it's like, okay, because he was really good with all this. And so I was like, okay, what did you forget? And he's like, my shoes. And he was in junior high at the time. And so I'm like, your football shoes? And he went, no, my shoes. I'm like, you're in your socks? He's like, Mom, just tell me you're going to do it. And so my husband was also a teacher, and so Bob would drive, Jared to school in the morning, and he had gotten a little bit later and later and not quite prepared. So he had taken to putting his shoes on in the car on the way to school, and that day he forgot to pick up his shoes. Now, again, he did everything else right that day. So, I mean, we're talking about he was dressed and he ate, he had his backpack, everything was good, but he forgot to pick up one thing, and that thing did tend to be critical. So I did bail him out on that one occasion, and I did bring him his shoes. Um, I couldn't see leaving a child in middle school without his shoes. But again, how many people have just missed one thing? And depending what the one thing was, um, it just really can wreck things. I had salespeople that had done a beautiful presentation and forgot their laptop, or they forgot a zip drive, or one guy forgot his suit jacket. And so again, it doesn't take much to really topple a morning, and then it cascades from there. So some of the reasons that we haven't really focused on mornings, one might be shame. I've had a lot of people, a lot of parents say, I didn't even want to talk about this because everybody else seems to be able to do this okay. A lot of the other parents can send their kids off to school, and there's not the drama. It's like everybody else can do this. Why can't I? So a lot of people take it on themselves that they must be inadequate. They just might be a failure. That it's their fault that the whole morning just turns into this awful thing. Um, and the second one would be just embarrassment about discussing, getting the help you need. A lot of people don't want to mention that the morning's a problem. And sometimes the people that we talk with just sort of give you a nod, and it's like, oh yeah, the mornings. Yeah, but let's get back to what's really important. Let's talk about work. Let's talk about school. But sometimes when you talk about the bookends of the day, whether it be the morning or the getting to bed at night, the sleeping, a lot of people just sort of smile and maybe patronize you and pat you on the head and say, you'll muddle through it. It'll be okay. Um, so I just want to let you know that, behind closed doors for over 30 years now, talking to people, if your mornings are a struggle, you're definitely not alone. And yes, it really is important because how we set up the day tremendously impacts how the day goes. So again, physicians in the past in particular really limited their focus in terms of the priority. Um, and so they pretty much left people to muddle through it and come up with their own resources, even when parents tried to talk about it. And again, if you work with a psychologist or a coach, you probably had more success coming up with different kind of strategies, structures, and reports. But the medical community in general, in the past tended to brush that off as not that big of an issue sometimes. This was interesting. This was a survey that has not been published, but it was done in 2019, and it showed the difference between healthcare providers' perceptions of difficulties and patients' perception, or the caregiver's perception. So when we're looking at children in terms of how big of a problem is mourning, with kids, the healthcare providers had it at 29% of a problem. And they even felt that 45% of the kids in the morning were controlled and not a challenging issue. Um, when they talked with the same patients or caregivers, we're looking at a 74% of them felt that mornings were definitely a challenge, and only 17% of them felt that it was under control and not a problem. So here we're looking at a perception gap of 45%. When we go to the adolescents, again, the healthcare providers only felt that 34% of the adolescents were having a challenge. When you talk to the patients or the caregivers, 62% said they were having a struggle. So again, a gap of 28%. And when you talk to adults, this one gets huge. 18% of the healthcare providers felt that mornings were a problem. 60% of the adults felt that mornings were a challenge. So again, there's a big perception gap. So even if you're speaking with a physician, if they feel that it's not that big of an issue, they're not going to really allot a lot of time to it. And again, if you think about the amount of time you actually have when you talk to a doctor, or if you're working with a coach, time is limited. And so it's important to prioritize the time, where you can really make a difference. So even if people did discuss the issues, there weren't a lot of strategies that could be done. I know back when Jared was little, our personal issue, we finally ended up waking him up at 5 o'clock in the morning to give him something that would kick in by the time he got up officially, like an hour later. And then we followed that up with other stuff. And so anyhow, so we did this layering thing. Um, some of the challenges with that we found, and again, many of the patients that I work with found, is once somebody's up, they tended to be up. So there was a little less sleep involved. But that was our lifeline, was, doing the waking up early piece. So again, that was one of the strategies that has been used in the past. So what I'd like to do next is move into, how do you get your mornings off to a better foot? What are some things that you might be able to do to turn this around so that you're not yelling or screaming or stressed out, to sort of ease into mornings on a better foot? So the first idea would be, if you are using medication, you might want to talk to your physician and let them know that this really is a problem. Again, if we look back at that perception slide, many of the physicians know that it could be an issue, but they don't think it's that big of an issue. So you may want to get your attention focused on that and bring it up. And then again, many of the physicians can do all sorts of stuff with adjusting doses of medications, trying different medications, changing timings of medications. So again, there's a lot of things that they're able to do, but you need to have an active conversation with them. The other thing I'd like to encourage you to do is, many people that I've worked with over the years don't work towards optimizing the medication, seeing what's the best. And the best example I can come up with is a vision chart. If you're using glasses and they put the first lens over and they ask, is this better? Usually it's, yeah, that is better. So what happens with a lot of medication management, it's like, oh, good, that's better. And then everybody stops. But just like with the vision exam, what if we try the next lens? What does that do? Is this better? And then it could be, yeah, that's really better. Or it could be, no, that's terrible. I don't like that. So then you go back. So again, I'd like to encourage you to really work with whoever you're working with to optimize your medication, to make sure that it's doing the best it can do, which helps set you up for success, so that a lot of the behavioral strategies we're going to talk about can be more effective. Um, and whatever it is that you're doing right now, if it's not working well enough, it's definitely worth revisiting the conversation to see what else can be done. Again, because there's a lot of different medications at a lot of different dose levels. There's a lot of behavioral strategies. There's coaching strategies. So again, if what you're doing isn't working well, please, please, please don't stop there. Start having conversations and seeing what else you might want to be trying so that it's not that really struggling time. Some of the resources that have been used a lot to help improve mornings, one would be Chad, ADDA, and Attitude Magazine have wonderful searchable websites with a lot of different articles, webinars, TED Talks, podcasts, all sorts of different topics that are written either from professionals or for parents with different ideas of things that they've tried that you might benefit from. Again, you might just be one good idea away from having a better morning. Uh, there's also parent blogs and different support groups that can also help you feel not so alone in sharing ideas and strategies. There's also a website called ADHDmorning.com, and that's dedicated for help with mornings, and it has a number of no-cost downloadable resources, including a morning discussion guide and a morning tip guide that you may find very helpful as well. So again, please look at the resources that are available to help you. You don't have to go this alone. It may also be time to add a professional to your team. You know, a lot of parents read, do a lot of self-help, a lot of support groups. But again, if you're still struggling, you know, sometimes it just takes a little bit of a different strategy from a professional to help you and your family get on track. Um, Now, this one gets a little tricky, but if you've been working with a professional and you don't feel like you're making progress, you may actually need to make a change. Um, all professionals are not equally skilled. Some professionals are a much better match for different issues, or it might even just be a personality preference. But again, if whoever you're working with, you're not making the progress, consider changing it out. Like for instance, I'm a psychologist and I happen to know an awful lot about ADHD. But if you came to see me, say for like something like a borderline personality disorder, I know about it. I learned about it in school. I've had a couple people who've had it, but that wasn't my strong point. Um, you know, so even though we have the same title, you know, make sure whoever you're working with really understands what you're struggling with and that you're moving forward. So progress, you know, should be the end game. So again, don't be afraid to get a second opinion from somebody. Don't be afraid to add a different member to your team. If what you're doing is not working, it might be time to add somebody else to your team or at least have a second opinion to see if there's something else you can do. Also, there's wonderful technology available now to help with the mornings. Again, there's just an explosion of apps and gadgets to help people manage your time and stuff. Cell phones have timers. Uh, One of the problems that many of my clients have had is they set one timer. Again, with ADHD and some of the challenges with attention and focus, usually you need more than one timer set, you know, like a 2-minute warning and then like the timer. So make sure that you use multiple alarms because just one timer when it's time to go out the door is too late. So again, set multiple steps along the way to make sure that you're staying on track. Also, a lot of my clients need to rely on things like traffic apps to let you know what time you need to leave. There used to be an app called Leave Now, and it would tell you based on traffic when to go. But again, you can get the same information. I think Waze does that. And there's other things because, you know, traffic patterns differ, especially in the morning. So make sure that you check those things so that you don't find yourself, you know, stuck in traffic longer than you intended. There's also some really fun creative clothing apps that might help you figure out what you want to wear. Again, when we talk to a number of people who struggle in the morning, Some of it's trying to make a decision because, again, if you have a lot of different clothes, and some people with ADHD are very touchy about how clothing feels, because if it doesn't feel comfortable, they're not going to want to wear it. So there's really nice clothing management apps. Some of the ones people I've worked with have used are things like Closet, Outfit Planner, Style Book. But again, you can search on your app store and see what might help. Um, there's also like sweater stackers that you can put your clothing for the whole week. You know, pick out 7 outfits and match them up on the weekend when you have more time, and then choose which one you want to wear that day. And again, nobody I know with ADHD will wear like the Monday clothes on Monday and Tuesdays on Tuesdays. Usually they want to sort of go with the flow a little bit more, and that's fine. At least you know you have 7 outfits there that you can choose from, so you're not scrambling to find, you know, a clean shirt or a pair of socks, shoes, whatever it is you're looking for. So again, use technology to help make things go better. There's also a toothbrushing app that plays one of your favorite songs for the amount of time you're supposed to be brushing your teeth. Helps time go faster. So again, check out technology and see if that might be useful for you for the morning. Um, Getting up tends to be a real challenge in the morning as well. There are wonderfully creative alarm clocks now. So again, I used Amazon. You can, whatever online retailer you want, but there's an alarm that actually jumps and rolls around, and you have to get out of bed and actually catch it to turn it off. So that's one way for people who had a hard time getting out of bed. Once your alarm clock starts rolling and going, you have no choice but to jump out of bed and go catch it. There's also some different alarms that require you to take photos of different things along your morning routine to keep you on track. You know, the ones say you have to take a picture of your toothbrush, you have to take a picture of your coffee pot or your backpack. There's another alarm clock that shakes your bed. I think it was called Shake Awake. There's also one that's fun, and it has a recording of whatever voice you want to wake you up. Um, some people, when they went to college, some of the kids I worked with had their mom's voice on their phone nagging them to wake up, and they felt comfortable with that. So again, take a look. There's a lot of new stuff out there that could make it easier to actually wake up, because once you wake up, then you have a better chance of getting out the door. There's also things, of course, like Siri and Echo and Alexa that you can use almost like a personal assistant to help things move along. So again, you can give different instructions to those to help you in your morning routine. Out the door is a really important key concept. Um, so one of the strategies I've used over and over and over again in counseling and in coaching is what I call backward planning, where you actually have to start with what time do you want to actually be walking out the door, and then go backwards from that. So when you're walking out the door, say at 7:45, you know, what does that mean in terms of when I have to be eating breakfast or when I have to be grabbing my stuff? And what does that mean in terms of when I have to be in the shower? And when you start planning your morning routine, you can make a list of all the different things that you have to do in the morning, and then figure out from then when do you really need to be walking out the door. A couple key points with that is that many people with ADHD struggle with perceptions of time. That's one of the challenges of executive functioning with ADHD. Um, so when I ask a lot of the people I work with, you know, how long does it take you to take a shower? They go, oh, about 10 minutes. You know, how long does it take you to, you know, do your whole morning eat, brush your teeth thing? And they're like, yeah, about 15 minutes. Um, and then when I ask how much they tend to be late for work or late for school, I might get like, oh, about 10 to 15 minutes. And so then I was like, I'd like you to time how long it actually takes. And once they start to time themselves, they tend to be shocked that no, they don't really take a 10-minute shower, and no, they really can't do the routine in 15 minutes. It's more like 30 or 35. And so all of a sudden, we found out where a lot of their morning went that surprised them. So again, if you or your kids have ADHD, please use a timer and see how long do these things really take. Because if they're really taking longer than they think, then they're not going to be planning to be out the door in time, and then they're just setting themselves up for being late. The other piece that, again, many people have struggled with is like if they have to be at school, say at 8 o'clock. Most of the people I worked with in the beginning were planning to be at school at 8 o'clock. Almost no one built in the cushion. Like if a concert is going to start at 8 o'clock, you don't plan on being there at 8. You definitely need to plan a cushion. And I used to tell people to do like a 10 or 15-minute cushion, and they tended to ignore that a lot. But then once I started making it like 8.5 minutes or something more creative, they tended to remember it better. So I don't know if that might help. But again, don't plan to be out the door exactly at the time to get there. You really need a cushion because life happens and it's way less stressful if you're there a little bit early. So bring something fun to do um, to occupy that time because it's much easier to occupy some extra time than it is to make up time and just set that whole stress level going. Also, and this one I know everybody's heard before, is you can gain more time in the morning by doing as many tasks as possible the night before or the weekend before. And you've probably heard it a million times before because it's really a good strategy. Again, the more things you can tick off at night might help the morning go much more smoothly. So, taking showers at night, picking out the clothing ahead of time, making the breakfast food ahead of time so you can do a grab and go. Landing and launch pads is a real important concept in general in ADHD management. Pick an area where, if you have a child, everything's going to get dropped. And again, laundry baskets work really well. Drop everything in the basket, the backpacks, the sporting equipment, whatever it is they need. And then if they need parental permission slips or whatever, you throw it in the basket. And so then when they go to take off, everything is in one spot. I can't tell you how many times in ADHD household people are, where is this? Where is that? I can't find this. So again, create a landing and launch pad where things go. For adolescents and adults, keys, wallet, cell phone. Have a place where all that belongs so that when you get ready to go out the door, you're not scrambling. Where did I put my phone? Also, a little cheat is that put a tile on it. They have these electronic devices that you can put on a couple key things, and if you can't find them, you can push a button and it'll locate it. A lot of my clients have used that for things like remotes and phones. Also, packing up the backpack ahead of time is big, and any kind of sporting activities. Several of my clients had actually used different like totes, and say it's a scouting thing. They have all the scouting thing in one tote, and they have all the, say, basketball stuff in another tote, so that when it's time to grab and go, everything stays contained. So again, think of things that cause you stress. The good thing about mornings are they're pretty routine. A lot of the morning behaviors are going to be the same. So once you can figure out how you do something, that's going to probably work for you for most mornings. So that would be good. Um, Again, having a discussion and using a discussion guide with your doctor might be helpful. One of the challenges that many of my clients had is when they went to discuss issues. I know this will shock you, but a number of my people would go off track and they would talk about some other things, even though they had something that they wanted to cover ahead of time. And they weren't really prepared to stay on the key talking points. So again, if you're looking at a medical doctor, you probably have about 7 minutes with them, maybe 10 if you're lucky. Um, and so it's really important to manage that time really well and let them know what your challenges are and what you might want to have done, what you've tried before, what you're doing now, so that you can really keep a focused time. So again, there's one example on ADHD Morning. They have an example of a discussion guide to help walk you through the prep time. Because I can't tell you how many clients have left talking to a professional and they really didn't get to talk about what was important for them to talk about. Um, sometimes I even had people send email notes, with the bullet points. So again, be prepared for those meetings because you do have a short period of time and the time is really precious and you need to get your point across. So to sort of cover some of what we've talked about, that if you or any family member struggles in the morning, um, you're not alone. It's not your fault. um, it's important to cover. So again, it's one of the areas that just hasn't really been tended to. So struggles in the morning emotionally can impact the rest of the day. If kids go to school and they've been yelled at and screamed at, and it's like, why can't you brush your hair? Why can't you remember to brush your teeth? And why can't you leave your sister alone and not be fighting? And they hear all this critical stuff, and they just, that's how they're starting their day. And I don't think any parent wants their kids to be starting their day that way. And the parents I talked to didn't want to be those parents either. So then they leave bummed because they've been stressed. And it just really sets a cascade effect going. Um, so again, school and work tend to be the most important, but let's not forget about the bookends. What's going on in the mornings are important, and what goes on at night's important too. Medication management may be a piece of changing your morning, especially if behavioral strategies alone or your current medication hasn't been successful. So again, let's look at optimizing things to take some of that lifting off. Um, when you have discussions with whoever it is who's helping you, make sure to have some clear, concrete examples. Sometimes I've had parents and this happens more probably with some of the women that I've worked with. They go in and they use very emotional language. It's like, oh, my mornings are so awful, and then they just sort of seem over exaggerating and overly emotional, but they don't give facts. They don't say my kid's been tardy 22 times already. Or that it really takes, I've put them in timeout 15 times before we even start. So again, be armed with clear, concrete information rather than emotional information so that you can come in and have a really guided discussion on that. And again, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are a lot of resources out there. So again, parents have been dealing with kids, adults have been dealing with time management for a while, and fortunately, technology has captured a lot of that. So again, if you have an issue that you're struggling with, check available resources. Again, for the morning, if that's of particular concern, ADHDmorning.com, CHAD.org, ADD.org, which is ADDA's website, and Attitude Magazine, attitudemag.com. Wonderful resources available to help you get some ideas. And again, you may only be one idea or one strategy away from having a better morning. So I would like to encourage you to not give up if this is an area that's of concern. There is hope, there is help, and there are things you can be doing differently. So I want to wish you all a good morning because that's a nice way to start the day. So then I guess we'll start to open it up for any questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Novotny. I already have one come in, and if you'd like, while we're taking this question, if you guys would like to type in your question into the question box, I will be reading those questions out loud to Dr. Novotny, and she'll answer any questions or concerns that you may have. So the first question is from Caitlin. She asks, what do you suggest for the fatigue felt in mornings for many of us with ADHD besides a set bedtime?
Um, Sleep is definitely a kingpin. So bedtime is important. It sounds like they already know that one, but sometimes it's also the quality of the sleep. A number of people might have sleep apnea where that impacts the actual quality of sleep. There are some really nice sleep apps. I think one is called Sleep Cycle. Um, you have to sleep alone that night though. But with Sleep Cycle, you put the app by your bed, excuse me, and it actually shows you when you're in different levels and stages of sleep. And it does a nice job of showing what the quality of your sleep is. So that might be a nice idea, is that people might be spending the right amount of time in bed, but they might not be getting the restorative rest they need. A number of people with ADHD also have things like restless leg syndromes. So I think this app actually shows you if you're doing a lot of flipping and flopping around at night too. So Sleep Cycle, again, you can just use the app. It's a paid app, but it's not that much, and you can use it just for like a month or whatever and track your quality of sleep. Um, but again, usually if you're really, really tired, it comes to what are you doing before and how much sleep do you need? Because again, some people need more than 8 hours of sleep. Especially if you're talking about kids or adolescents, and even a number of adults, 8 hours is sort of the gold standard, but a lot of people might need 9 or 10 hours. So again, you might actually need more sleep than you think that you're getting. But again, I'd probably start with like an app to check out, are you snoring? Because again, the app will actually record your snores. That's always fun to play those back for people. But just check the quality of your sleep could be an issue, and probably the quantity of sleep. How much sleep do you really need? You might find that if you sleep for 9 hours, you're way happier than if you sleep for 7. So fatigue might just be an issue of how much sleep your body actually needs. So those would be some starting points. And again, if you check out some of the resources, on like Chad and ADDA and Attitude Magazine, they have a lot of information on sleep, and they have some really nice sleep experts that have done some really nice podcasts and things on sleep that might provide some more information.
Thank you. Karen asks, my 17-year-old daughter does virtual school and getting her started is very difficult. How can we get her to focus and get started on school? So I guess you're not leaving the house, but you still have to have that transition. So any advice for Karen?
Um, Well, a lot of the kids with ADHD also have different sleep cycles, like in terms of when they're most awake and alert and when they perform best. If, oh, I guess virtual school maybe starts on a set time. If it doesn't start on a set time, adolescents usually aren't hitting their prime time when we usually make them go to school. We have adolescents getting up at like 6 in the morning and being in school a lot of times at 7, when actually given their rhythms, if we started school at like 11 or 12, they would do so much better. So, it's possible that if they have flexibility, they might want to look at actually changing their start time. If that doesn't work, you basically could benefit maybe by having a structure in place, just like you're going to a regular school. A lot of times if people are at home, they don't do the getting dressed and eating breakfast routine. Um, and they sort of can be flexible with things, but if you had a routine, where kids really did get up and get dressed, uh, even though nobody would know if they're doing school in their pajamas. But to set up that routine and then also see what's getting in the way. What are they doing instead of doing school? Are they being lured by their cell phone? Are they being lured by a TV away? What's getting in the way, and then maybe develop some specific strategies for that. A lot of kids are pulled into either video games or their cell phones and Instagram and things. So, there might need to be some parental guidelines around when is an okay time to be on the computer, for gaming versus, doing work, and when is an okay time to be on your cell phone. And there's also some really nice programs that block non-work activities for set periods of time. So you actually can block out things like Facebook and Instagram and only have like research kind of sites for a set period of time. So again, technology may be able to help, but I would come up with a structure as much like school as possible with the same timing as school, and then see how that goes. So those would be some starting points. And again, if they're still struggling, that might be something that talking with a coach or a psychologist, and sharing a couple ideas, might just help get that one back on track as well.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is from Gary. He asks, do you have any suggestions for getting a child with ADHD to dress appropriately for the weather? I'm guessing there's an argument, which slows things down. Instead of shorts, maybe wearing pants when it's 30 below, things like that.
Okay, so this would be, pick your battles where it's important. Um, So part of it would be having some conversations not during the morning. So, maybe during a weekend, you could look at the weather forecast and have a conversation. What do the next 7 days look like? And if it's that cold, um, what would be appropriate to wear? And then again, if you use like the sweater stacker kind of idea or something where you actually pick clothing out, that may help. Some of the kids, again, with ADHD might run hot temperature wise, and so they actually don't like a lot of clothing on. So that might be something to talk about too, would be what are they picking and why are they picking it? So again, if we're looking at for appropriate for the weather, I'm assuming they're wearing something, probably too hot or too cold. And I would guess that they're probably wearing like more summery things when it's cold out. And again, part of it would be just talking about it. And possibly it could be that they feel fine doing that. So then you might just get into the social aspects of, how many other kids in your class were wearing shorts when it was 23 degrees and snowing. No one's doing that. And so even if they're physically comfortable, it would be an idea of you don't purposely want to look odd. Again, not that you're encouraging peer pressure, but there are norms. So what would be the right things to wear? So again, if you looked at the forecast ahead of time, picked out the outfits for the week ahead of time, then I think you have a better shot at getting them up and out the door, because sometimes they can just want to wear something and grab it and they just sort of get fixated on it. So those may be a good starting point for help.
Thank you. Okay, Jamie asks, do you have any thoughts on how to offer these strategies to a college student who lives at home just during December and over the summer? So they're there part-time.
Okay, so I guess the piece would be, are they having a hard time getting up and out the door during school time? Or is that only something that's an issue when they're home? That one's a little confusing for me. Um, but a lot of college kids in general, if they're having a hard time getting to class on time, again, a coach might be really useful, because again, if parents suggest things, sometimes it doesn't go over as well, but a couple sessions with a ADHD coach could definitely help them come up with what kind of strategies might work for you, because it's not just going to be at college that they're going to have issues with, getting up and out the door on time. This is going to filter into job interviews and hopefully a job. Um, there's very few jobs where you can come in whenever you feel like it. Uh, so many people have to really be on time for that purpose as well. So part of the conversation with parents could be, this is a bigger issue than just now. It's going to be for the rest of your life. It's important to be on time, because people really do get offended if you're wasting their time by making them wait, even if it's for a social activity. Um, So those might be some starting points. And again, a lot of the college counseling centers have counseling available at no charge for people. So they may want to check with their college counseling center for some strategies that might be useful as well.
Thank you. Ashia asks or says basically that she's tried many of the digital and technology solutions, and it ends up being a distraction for her child and just makes things worse. Do you have any thoughts on empowering him instead of policing him and maybe some other solutions other than the technology that's available?
Sometimes you can go old school. I've had some people, again, I don't know the age we're talking about, but I've had some people who have actually done physical calendars with pictures, for the morning routine. Again, for some of the younger kids, you can have a picture of the child doing the different activities on a picture board, or you can use a whiteboard. Um, so again, a lot of people with ADHD benefit from having visual kind of cues, but it doesn't have to be digital. It can be old school. You can revert back to stars and stickers. You can revert back to, as I said, the whiteboards and crossing things off. A lot of people like to cross things off. So some people have a board with the different tasks and then they put check marks after they do it, or they can cross them off after they're done. It also can be fun sometimes to mix it up and have a bowl with different tasks on it that they have to do, and they get to pick one out of the bowl and do that one. Again, a lot of people with ADHD get very bored with routines. So sometimes it helps to sort of mix things up some. Another strategy for distraction is where you cross the midline. There's a thing called brain gym, and you actually do a couple exercises where, say, you touch your left ear with your right finger, and then you do the opposite, or you touch your left knee with your right hand or elbow. So again, if you sort of do a check online for different brain gym exercises, sometimes if you do things like that, it helps activate your brain and can help you be more focused. So again, there's some of that online, or I have had people who have done physical activity. There's a lot of emerging research on the importance of physical activity. And once some people have been physically active, they also tend to be distracted less. I had one little guy who used to run laps around the house in the morning and then go back to do his tasks, and that really decreased his distractibility. And the mom got some of her running in as well. So they just started off the morning running around the house a couple times, and then that really seemed to help with distraction as well. So those might be some starting points there too.
Thank you. Daniel asks, does coffee affect how one with ADHD starts his or her morning since coffee has caffeine?
A number of people have said yes, but sometimes people have said it's almost a paradoxical effect, that sometimes coffee tends to help them settle down as opposed to rev up. So that's an interesting thing that some people notice, that if they had caffeine, they actually were better able to get through some of the activities. So caffeine is similar in some ways to some medications, but different. So some people swear that it helps them a lot. There's also the highly caffeinated drinks that I know a number of my clients had used. Some of the energy drinks that are really high on caffeine. I think they did Mountain Dew, coffee with espresso shots. So again, I think this is something you sort of do trial and error. That sometimes coffee has been beneficial and some of the caffeinated drinks have been beneficial for people, and sometimes not. So that would be a personal kind of preference. But I have been familiar with a number of my clients swearing that they do much better, after they've had 2 or 3 or 4 cups of coffee.
Thank you. Okay, so we have multiple questions regarding children just being oppositional about getting ready in the morning or even being prepared in the evening. So do you have any tips or suggestions for these parents who just cannot get their kids to cooperate with any of the things that they're trying to do?
Yeah, when you have the ADHD paired with oppositional defiant disorder, and again, there is a healthy chunk of them that have both. Um, that gets to be extra challenging because again, it's hard enough to come up with some strategies and structures and supports that work, but if you have somebody who's always fighting to not be controlled, that gets to be a challenge. So one of the things with oppositional kids would be to figure out a way for them to perceive that they're making choices, to give them as many choices as possible with things. So it wouldn't be, it's time to take a shower now. It's like, all right, so there's, three things you need to do to get ready for bed first. Do you want to do your shower, or do you want to brush your teeth, or do you want to set your clothes up? Or even just give them two things to choose from, and give them as much choice as possible, and also give them the ways they want to do it. They might want to, I don't know what they might want to do that's different. They might want to eat pizza for breakfast in the morning. And that's actually okay. Uh, so, try to figure out as much as possible what they want to do, how they want to do it. And then asking them things like, well, is this a good choice? And they can go, yeah, because I can grab it. I'm fine with eating cold pizza. It'll work fine. So again, kids tend to be oppositional when the parents are super controlling, and parents with ADHD tend to need to be more controlling than regular parents because their kids don't have that internal structure. So it's sort of a catch-22. If it's a serious oppositional issue, again, I would highly recommend working with a professional because these are trickier than normal. But the biggest basics would be to give them as much control as possible, to let them change things up as much as possible, and sometimes let them face some of the consequences. So instead of saying we need to be out the door, it's 10 of 7, say what time do you think we need to be out the door? Let's try it this way, and then let them see what happens when they do get to the end of themselves. Because again, eventually people need to be able to get themselves up and out. So, it's better for them to have failures while they're younger, instead of pushing them to be successful by having all that scaffolding there. So sometimes there needs to be a little breach in the scaffolding so they realize they need some different strategies, at least while you're still there. So again, control would be the piece, choices would be the key word. And for the combo kids, it might be time to add somebody to your team. This might be one of the examples that we're talking about.
Thank you. We do have a couple of questions regarding providing a healthy breakfast. Um, if they choose not to have the healthy breakfast and for the sugary cereals, or um, do you insist upon them having a certain type of food? What ideas or suggestions do you have regarding breakfast?
Um, if the kids are on medication, breakfast is going to become more important because many of the medications, the kids don't really eat a good lunch. So it is a good idea to try to get something in them. If a sugary, in general, I'm not a fan of a lot of the chemicals and, processed foods kind of thing. So again, what is it that they might like? And it could be milkshakes, or it could be leftover dinner that they like. So again, breakfast food doesn't have to look like breakfast food. Um, so it would be important to maybe talk to them about what kind of things they do like, and then from the things they like, figure out how to make it healthier. So suppose they like French fries. So you might be able to have sweet potato fries in the air fryer. So that might be a nice substitute that's sort of like what they want, but healthier. Um, so again, I think in general, it's important to have healthy food. I know there's been debates raging forever on the impact of sugar in kids with ADHD and different food colorants and things like that. And I know for some kids that that does make a huge difference. But again, if you don't have a sugary breakfast cereal box sitting in your cupboard, you know, they're less likely to then be really throwing tantrums for that. So you might want to have a healthier choice that sort of looks like what they have. Also, if some of the kids will cook their own breakfast, you know, then they're a little bit more invested. But, you know, again, here's a conversation starter. What kinds of things do you like to eat for breakfast? You know, and what can we do from that? So again, have those discussions ahead of time, involve them in the process. And in general, it tends to be a good idea to really watch the chemicals and additives um, for everybody, not just people with ADHD.
Thank you. And we have time for just one more question. Do you have any suggestions on how to manage the craziness in the morning, the making the noises and bouncing around, the very hyperactive kid?
I had one of those. So again, the little guy I had running around the house with his parent before he started was a really hyperactive kid. So we just sort of started the day off with exercise, you know, whether it be jumping jacks, running in place, shooting some hoops for basketball. So again, if you can help them be physically active, that may be beneficial for them to run off some of their steam. And again, this may be an opportunity for them to talk with their physician and see if there's any adjusting or things that they might be able to do, you know, to help them be more less hyper in the morning. Um, but again, some physical activity probably be good. I had some kids that actually would sing in the morning too. And that seemed to help burn off a little bit of their energy. But again, if it's a serious problem with them, you know, being highly distracted and running around, it would be good to talk to their doctor and see what they might be able to come up with.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we've answered a lot of your questions, so thank you very much for all of those great questions. They were really good. And thank you for answering those questions and for the presentation. It was very educational and informative. So for everybody who has joined us, the recording will be provided in the next 24 hours. So you will also have a recording of today's session. So thank you, Dr. Novotny. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, and I hope some mornings go a little bit better.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon, everybody.